Guilt tightened my throat when the key turned before I could knock. The door opened a fraction. Daniel's silhouette filled the frame and his mouth made the name, Evelyn. I had a folded apology in my hand and no plan to meet his eyes. The concrete problem was clear in the first breath. I had come to give him a letter I would never send, and the sight of him stopped me on the landing. I pressed the paper into my palm and forced my feet forward, because staying on the stairwell felt like lingering punishment. I moved into the doorway and smelled his apartment, cold coffee, cedar, and a scent I still associated with him. I have been carrying a version of blame for months, and that blame is what brought me here tonight. I meant to hand it over and let him decide if I deserved any reply. Guilt was the engine under everything I did that evening, pushing me to make myself smaller in front of him and to explain away my absence. You shouldn't be here. Daniel, and his voice kept a steady line as if practice had taught him only one volume. I heard the floorboard creak as he stepped back, and to my surprise he stepped aside instead of shutting the door. The choice he made in that instant, ushering me in, shifted the meeting from a private ritual into something that could hurt in public. I followed him inside. The living room felt too neat. A low table, one lamp, a single photograph casually propped against a coaster. I put a hand against the doorframe to steady myself and felt my fingers tremble. Daniel, I said, and the name left a small sound that had no armor. He didn't sit. He kept his coat half on as if he might leave again. Why are you here, Evelyn? He asked. His jaw was tight. That question was not the same as the invitation. It implied a boundary he expected me to respect. I closed my lips around the apology I had practiced for weeks and instead answered, I need to say something I never let myself say before. He moved to the coffee table and I noticed two objects that made the familiar ground tilt. A glossy photograph face down and a folded plane ticket tucked under a glass ashtray. My heart stuttered. I reached for the photograph without thinking. My hand hovered above the paper and the sudden thought arrived sharp and exact. He was moving on. That assumption made my next steps louder and more urgent than they should have been. I touched the ticket and it was warm from his hand. I flipped the photograph and saw him, not with another woman, but with an older woman I did not recognize, a child in a small arm. The ticket had a date 4 days from now and a destination I didn't immediately place. My eyes moved from the ticket back to Daniel. Who is she? I asked, voice smaller than I intended. Daniel's face went blank for a beat long enough to be obvious. He folded his arms and avoided looking at the photograph first. She's my sister's friend, Evelyn, he said without explaining why a child would be in the picture. I'm not leaving in any romantic way. That's not. Before he could finish, a new sound arrived in the doorway. Marina's steady tread and the scrape of a tote bag on tile. She stepped in as if she had always belonged in the frame, and she stood beside me like a small, practical shield. Evelyn, I told you I'm coming with you. Marina. Her voice carried a flat, protective clarity. The presence of someone who had followed me to prevent a mistake turned the room from a private confession into a public confrontation. Marina had the practical look of someone who would bring tea and a plan. She came forward, set her tote on the table, and reached instinctively for the folded paper trembling in my hand. Her fingers closed around it before I stopped her. Marina, I began, but she didn't hesitate. She unfolded the sheet and read a single line aloud that landed like a measured fact. I keep saying I'm sorry because I left and then I pretended there was nothing wrong. The sentence didn't dress emotion up in metaphors. It listed an action and a fault. Hearing my own words outside my head made the room shift. My shoulders dropped for a fraction. Daniel's eyes softened in an uncomfortable way, the way someone unpracticed in softness looks at a wound he can't dress. Evelyn, Daniel slowly. You left because you had to leave. You didn't disappear for a reason I need an apology for. He folded his hands on his coat. His voice was low and controlled. It asked me to listen because he could not explain everything without losing his restraint. Marina didn't wait for a further invitation. Daniel, she has the letter. Marina plainly. She looked at me, then at him, and the room compressed into the three of us, read it. See what she has been saying to herself all night. I felt my throat close. I had brought the letter as a way to force language into a place where silence had held sway. Now it seemed smaller and sharper than I'd imagined. Don't read it out loud, I said. But Marina had already begun to read the next line in that calm, unsparing voice she uses when facts are required. She read, "I am sorry I made you carry my anger like it was yours. I am sorry I tied my fear into your hands and told myself it was protection." The sentence fell between us and made clear that part of what I wanted to do tonight was confess a wrong I had made into someone else's burden. I had been carrying a mistaken responsibility, and now, with the letter in the room, that responsibility no longer fit comfortably on my back. Daniel's posture changed in a way that was small but meaningful. His shoulders relaxed fractionally, the fold between his brows eased, and he took a breath that let out as much as his face would permit. "Evelyn," he said, and his voice had a small, unpleasant softness, an admission that he had not wanted to name before. "Why did you think you had to apologize for me?" My immediate reaction was to explain, claw back the narrative I'd been rehearsing. "You left the night before my appointment," I said. "You had to go. I thought you left because I begged you to, because of what I had said. I blamed myself when you didn't come back for weeks. I learned to make my own absence into a confession." Saying those sentences aloud made the old wound expose edges I had kept patched. Daniel's mouth pressed into a line. "You made that choice because you were trying to keep something safe, Evelyn. You chose to leave. I never asked you to go. I didn't make you apologize for me." There was a moment when the facts in the room rearranged themselves. For a second I allowed the possibility that my guilt belonged to me and was not a debt owed to him. That shift was one of the two emotion changes I needed, from guilt toward confused relief. The second change followed quickly, doubt reshaped into sharp anger at myself for letting the story of his leaving be the story I'd told myself for so long. Marina leaned forward. "Daniel, what is the ticket for?" she asked. Her voice was direct. She put pressure on the practical detail, because she knows I need facts more than sympathy when I feel unmoored. Daniel glanced down and then, finally, he held out the ticket between two fingers. "My sister's flight was cancelled last month," he said. "They called me today. I booked a ticket to take her and her son out of the city for a week. That's why the photograph was there." I didn't mean to make anyone think. He stopped because the explanation was a small thing that cut a larger assumption. The twist reoriented the room. What I had seen as evidence of moving on was a document of family duty. That revelation altered how I looked at the photograph, and the change in interpretation rebalanced the stakes in a way that landed like a re-measurement. I let out a long breath that was half relief and half shame. "I assumed you were trying to replace what we had," I admitted. "I assumed you had already forgiven yourself and moved on." Saying the assumptions out loud felt like removing a bandage slowly and noticing how long it had been left. Daniel's reply was contained. "Evelyn, I moved on in a practical sense. My life moves forward, but not because I wanted to erase what we had. You leaving was not something I punished you for. I was muddled and I kept a distance because I couldn't explain my own mess. That was close to an apology without the word. It was not theatrical. It was a tidy human attempt to correct a record." Marina watched us with a small, attentive patience. "Evelyn, why are you so hard on yourself?" she asked. Her question was not rhetorical. It was aimed to make me act. A sudden, impatient anger rose in me that I had not expected. "Because I always fix things by erasing myself," I said. "Because I thought if I disappeared, no one would be hurt by me staying. Because I made myself the problem so you didn't have to be one." The paragraph of confessions came fast and brief and left behind a rawness that made my hands tremble. Daniel folded his arms and took in the words like someone listening for instructions. "That is not your job, Evelyn. You cannot be the person who turns everything into a debt you pay off alone." The argument that followed was short, but it contained the rapid back and forth the room needed. Sharp, revealing, and full of small admissions. "Daniel, you left a voicemail I never heard," I said. "Daniel, you didn't call back." "Daniel, my silence filled with stories and I believed them." "Evelyn, I left a message." "Evelyn, I couldn't say what you deserved." "Evelyn, I should have come to your door sooner." His lines were clipped and human, not perfect. They fit together the way rough boards can still make a shelter. "Marina, stop saying Evelyn like you are marking time. Say what happened. Say who owes what." For a moment, the three of us circled the same wound and each offered a different tool. The room held the rawness of damaged people trying to repair a shared object with different sets of hands. My next movement was small and decisive. I drew the folded letter from my pocket and set it on the coffee table between them. My pulse hammered in my ears. I watched the paper sit on the wood and felt how tiny that gesture was. I could hand it over, or I could keep it. That choice was the peak I had been building toward all evening, the moment marked as the chapter's climax. My body went through the changes aloud. My hands began to shake, my breath shortened, and my voice came out thin. I wrote this to you because I needed to say who I thought I was, I said. I wrote it because I wanted to set down the ways I blamed myself. My admission was a physical act. Words hit air and created a clear shape that could be handled. Marina leaned in. Give it to him, Evelyn, she said. Give it to him, and then whatever happens, you will know you tried. Her voice tried to be brave for me. Daniel looked at me and then at the paper and made the motion of reaching for it, a slow, careful movement. For a split second I saw another version of what would follow if I let the letter cross hands, an exchange that might allow forgiveness, or a refusal that would turn the wound outward. I felt the second required emotion shift. I had moved from guilt to tentative clarity, and then toward resolve. I made a choice that surprised me. I pushed the letter slightly toward Daniel, but kept my fingers on the edge so neither of us could snatch possession. I don't want you to keep this because you feel forced to forgive me, I said. I don't want you to keep this because it makes you responsible for something that only I can own. The sentences came in short bursts because I could not hold their weight in a long line. Daniel paused with his hand over the paper. Evelyn, he said, and then, quieter, if you want me to read it, I will. If you want to keep it, I will respect that too. I realized then that the chapter's small climax had pulled a truth into the open. Some apologies are not requests made to others, but ceremonies we perform to change how we carry ourselves. My next decision had to be not about him, but about what I needed to carry forward. I slid the letter back toward myself and stood up. I am not giving it to you, Daniel, I said clearly. I wrote this for me and I am taking it back for that reason alone. Saying the sentence made a physical change in the room. Daniel's hand retreated and Marina's fingers tightened briefly on my sleeve in a small, encouraging squeeze. Daniel's face registered something between surprise and something like respect. Evelyn, he said, I wish you'd told me sooner you were hurting like that. His words were not perfect balm. They were an honest attempt to acknowledge more than he had been willing to acknowledge before. I nodded and picked the letter up. The paper felt heavier when I held it by myself than it had when I expected to hand it away. Marina guided me gently to the doorway with one hand under my elbow. We stepped into the stairwell together. The night air hit my face and the cold had the practical quality of a thing that clears thinking. On the landing, Marina, you did the hard part. You came here and you spoke it. That matters. Evelyn, she did not offer the sweeping consolation I had learned to expect. She offered a small, exact service, naming the action and nothing more. That concrete recognition steadied me. We walked down 3 flights in 2 small bursts of quiet. Then Marina stopped and faced me. Are you going to keep it? She asked. Her question demanded a choice, not a story. I answered with the only thing that felt honest. Yes, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to put it somewhere I can take it out and read it if I need to remember exactly what I decided to forgive myself for. My voice held a steadier pitch than earlier. The decision had shifted something practical inside me. Instead of handing guilt to someone else, I filed it. Back in my apartment, I laid the letter across my journal on the bookshelf and slid the book edge, first into the stack where I could reach it. I did not burn it or throw it away. I gave it a place. The physical act of pushing the book back into its slot closed the tiny ritual. Marina hugged me once at the doorway and left without a long farewell. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the journal, letting the folded paper breathe between the pages. I did not write a final reflective sentence about a new beginning. I closed a small, private door. The letter was no longer an accusation against anyone else. It belonged to me. The last thing I did in the chapter was push the journal back on the shelf and walk past the small window to the kitchen where a kettle waited on the stove, a mundane, resolute object that required attention next. The chapter ends with the kettle's first small whistle cutting across the room as I set my hand on its handle. The door clicked closed behind me, and I set the folded letter on the kitchen table while Daniel kept washing a glass at the sink. Guilt pushed the words into my hands long before I left my apartment. That guilt sat in my throat now and made me keep my voice small. I had thought delivering the apology would change something concrete. The concrete problem was simple. I had come to give him a letter and he could refuse it. When the key turned on his door last week and his silhouette had filled the frame, I had not planned how my presence would land between us. I remembered that exact moment so clearly I could say the way his jaw moved when he said my name. That memory pushed me into his kitchen tonight. I told myself I would be brief. I told myself I would not ask for anything. Daniel set the glass down. He did not turn fully. He kept one hand on the sink, as if the faucet was an anchor. "You didn't have to come, Evelyn," he said. His voice was low and measured. The sentence landed like a question and a warning at the same time. I stepped closer to the table and smoothed the crease of the envelope with my fingertip. I needed to do this, I told him. My fingers left an oil mark on the paper. The kitchen light hummed over the enamel. Daniel watched the mark as if it told him more than I would. He one-clipped question, "Why now?" The single line made me count a heartbeat. "Because I owe it to you," I said, and the word owed tasted wrong in my mouth. My guilt had been the engine of the choice to write the letter. That guilt had pushed me to draft every sentence, cross out whole paragraphs, and practice holding the envelope without handing it over. Now the guilt pressed my shoulders forward. Daniel folded his arms, owed. To me, he folded the words around his teeth. His brows drew together. He used my name once, like testing whether it still fit in conversation. I reached for the envelope. My hand hovered and then paused. This small motion turned the room into a decision. If I handed it over, I gave him a chance to accept blame or refuse it back. If I kept it, I kept something for myself. The choice mattered. "Don't," he said after a breath. "Don't give me things to fix." The sentence was neither gentle nor cruel. It was a refusal turned into advice. Marina arrived while the words still hovered. She opened the door with her canvas tote slung over one shoulder and a paper cup of tea in hand. She moved into the light and set the cup on the counter, where she could reach both of us. Her presence changed the shape of the room instantly. "Evelyn, Marina," and she reached for my hand as if to steady me. She did not ask permission to stay. She simply stayed. Her steadying touch pushed the next moment forward. "Marina, Daniel," and the tone made clear that her being here was unwelcome and also impossible to remove. Marina's eyes dropped to the envelope on the table. She nodded once. "You gave it to him, or you keep it," she said. Her voice was plain. She set the cup down and folded her fingers around it like a small shield. I told them what I'd written in 2 short sentences. I did not read the letter aloud. I did not dramatize the words I had already spent nights shaping. I wrote to say I'm sorry for what I did when we were together, I said. Saying the apology aloud made my chest ache a little. The H was honest. I could not make it a metaphor. Daniel slammed the washcloth into the sink and turned. His face was a map of lines I knew well. "You always do that, Evelyn," he said. "You apologize like it's the only thing you can give." The accusation hit a different place than I expected. It landed not on guilt but on something raw and old. "Daniel," I said slowly, "I am not trying to." "Don't say it," he cut in. "Don't make me the one you fix. Don't make me responsible for your mistakes." His hands moved as if to push the table away from us. "You came here to hand me a weapon and call it contrition." I froze. The word weapon made my fingers tighten on the edge of the table. That tightening was shame turning into anger. For a moment I tasted defiance. Marina shifted. "Daniel, stop," she said. "Evelyn came here to close something. Let her try. Close." "Daniel." He put his palm flat on the table. "Evelyn, do you know what you did?" He named the specific thing that had ended us. He it without a flourish. The night I left our apartment at 3 in the morning with half a sentence. The unpaid call. I never returned. The choice to walk away when he had asked me to stay. He the date. He the exact words I had spoken. Each detail struck like an object thrown at a window. The glass did not break, but the sound of it hitting made something ring in my ribs. I answered with short sentences. "I know, I don't make excuses. I thought time would help me understand." My speech was clipped because I did not want to give him anything he could toss back at me. Daniel's face folded. He leaned forward and then back, a motion that looked like measurement. "You left with no reason," he said. "You left and I had to call your sister and the landlord. You left and everyone thought it was me. You left and I had to answer for you. You left and I got the blame," my name at the end of the sentence, as if attaching it would change the weight. Marina reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Evelyn, breathe," she said. Her voice was calm, but it made room for what was happening. She used my name the way someone sets a brace under something that is leaning. I swallowed. The guilt shifted under my sternum into something sharper: defensiveness. I had not come here to fight that night. I had come to hand over a letter and to say aloud what had been trapped in me. My jaw clenched. "You think I left to hurt you," I said. "You think I walked out because I wanted to punish you. That isn't true." The words came too fast. Daniel lowered his eyes for a beat. I heard him breathe. Our argument snapped into a rapid exchange then, short lines thrown back and forth like quick pebbles. "You think I don't know pain. Daniel, you think I never wanted things to be different." I answered. "You think I wanted to run." I said. "You think I didn't try." You think you were the only one who suffered," he said. The back and forth lasted 6 quick moves. Each sentence was a small strike. Each name was a reminder of the people we had been when we made promises. The room tilted under weight. Daniel folded his hands and said something new, something quieter. "You write apologies if they will change facts," he said. "They don't. They only make me responsible for reading them." I heard the edge in his voice and the truth underneath it. He had been carrying a different kind of trouble. He had been the one to answer friends' calls, to explain my absence, to endure a rumor that cast him as the villain. I had assumed my guilt alone needed fixing. I had not imagined the way my leaving had pushed blame onto him. That realization pressed against the letter in front of me. My guilt shifted again, back into a softer, steadier shape. The new feeling was not relief, it was the slow opening of understanding. Daniel crossed the kitchen and stood near the table, closer than he had been when he watched from the sink. "There is something I haven't told you," he said. His voice thinned. It was the first time in the room he sounded unguarded. My fingers tightened on the envelope. "What is it?" I asked. He rubbed the spot between his brows. "After you left, I thought the easiest thing was to make myself a problem you had left behind. I told people you left because of me so they'd stop asking. I didn't want their pity to be on me. I made a story that made sense to them. I made myself the villain so no one would look closer." Daniel's admission fell into the space like a small, blunt stone. Marina made a low noise, half catch, half admonition. "Daniel," she said, "you that out loud." She kept her voice steady and then looked at me. His shoulders dropped for a second. "I said it because I didn't know how to tell you that I had my own fear. I was terrified of being the one who couldn't keep promises. I thought if I made the story about you, I'd stop being vulnerable. I thought I could hold the line by pushing you away." His hands were trembling when he said the last part. The tremor was concrete and not decorative. This was a twist I had not expected. I had come to offer contrition, and the thing that split open first was his confession. The room rearranged itself around this new fact. The letter on the table looked smaller. "So you chose to be the story people told," I said. "You chose the version where you re the bad one." My voice held a question and a hurt. "I did," he said, "and I am sorry for that. I am sorry for how I let it stand while you fixed yourself alone." He stepped closer until the lamplight picked out the crease at the corner of his eye. Marina's eyes moved between us. "Both of you have been carrying things you never said," she said. "Neither of you deserved to do it alone." She folded her hands around her tea, the small cup warming under her fingers. My anger thinned into something like exhaustion. "Then stop asking me to give you an apology to carry," I said to Daniel. "Stop asking me to give you the thing that lets you keep being hurt. I'm tired of packaging my feelings into offerings. So what, Evelyn?" "Daniel, keep it, burn it, make it mine by omission." He demanded answers in short sentences. "I don't know yet," I said. The admission felt honest and dangerous. Saying I did not know took the heat from the table for a moment. The conversation hit the chapter's highest pitch after that. We collided in a messy, honest exchange. Daniel accused me of leaving at a time when he needed me. I accused him of building a story that cost me my peace. Marina interrupted with a steadying line 3 times, her voice thin but firm. The back and forth sped up, sentences shortening further, names falling into the air frequently, so the listener could track who said what. Evelyn, you left like you could fix things later. Daniel, Evelyn, you left and never asked how to stay. The repetition was deliberate. Daniel, you decided the story for me. I shot back. Daniel, you decided that I'd be the one to blame and you let it stand. Why would I come back to that? I pressed my palm flat on the table and felt the grain under my fingers. Marina, stop circling. Say what you mean. Evelyn, what do you want? Daniel, what would you accept? Her questions forced narrow answers. I moved to hand him the envelope. My fingers extended and then withdrew. The motion was small, but it contained every choice I'd rehearsed at home. Daniel's hand hovered at his side, closed, then opened. Neither of us reached the same place at once. He stepped forward and then away. He covered his face with one hand and laughed once, short and without humor. I don't want you to give me things so I can carry your guilt, he said. I don't want to be the place you dump your apologies. I don't want that. His face was plain with anguish. Then don't take it, I said. Don't take the letter. It's not yours to hold so you can feel right. It's mine to write. Marina spoke then, firmly. Evelyn, if you want to close something, close it for you. If you want to be forgiven, ask for it from yourself. If you want him to know, tell him, but don't make him the jar you bottle your shame into. She squeezed my hand and let go. There was a sudden, raw silence after that. Daniel walked to the small window above the sink and looked out into the street. His profile was dark against the glass. The silence thinned and then broke as he turned. I pushed my story because I was afraid of my own failure, he said. But I also refused to let you close your part. I wanted to keep some control over the narrative. That was cowardice. I know that now. His voice was low. The confession was not theatrical. It read like facts. The climax ended with a moment where both of us spat short sentences simultaneously, one confession and one refusal, and then stopped. We had said what we had come to say. The unsent letter lay between us like an artifact of intention. Daniel left the room after that. He moved through the doorway with his jacket half on, his hand on the jamb as if steadying himself. He did not slam the door. He closed it quietly and let the muffled thud be the sound of retreat. I sat down hard in the chair and the legs scraped on tile. Marina folded forward and put the teacup down on the table with both hands. She curled her fingers over mine. You did the hard thing by coming, she said. My fingers found the envelope again. In the quieter aftershock, I opened it and smoothed the paper flat across my lap. The lines I had written were clean and specific. I read them aloud to myself in a low voice. Daniel, I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I let silence do the work of explaining me. I am sorry I hurt you. I don't ask you to fix what was broken. I ask forgiveness for the ways I made you carry what I should have owned. The sentences in the letter were simple and precise. When I finished, I folded the letter along the same crease and tucked it into my journal. The motion was deliberate, and it changed the meaning of the paper. I closed the journal and felt the weight of its spine through the cloth. Tucking the apology into my book was not surrender, it was a choice. It moved my guilt from being an offering to being material I would keep and examine. Marina stood and hugged me without a word. She let go and checked the time. You should go, she said. Her suggestion read like a plan rather than a command. I walked to the door and felt the envelope and the journal against my ribs. The stairwell smelled like old paint and cold air. Daniel's laugh from earlier echoed in my head for a second and then faded. I pulled the building door closed behind me and felt the deadbolt click into place. Outside, the street was empty and wet from a passing drizzle. The city lights smeared on the pavement. I held my journal tight and walked down the stairs. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I looked down at the screen without stopping. A message from Daniel glowed in the dark. Call me when you can. I paused, thumb hovering. I did not reply in that moment. I put the phone away and kept walking. The decision to keep the letter in my journal felt like an answer that needed time to settle. I slid my key into the lock of the street level gate, turned it, and the gate latched with a deep, small sound. That click closed the chapter of the evening and left open what would come next. Daniel opened the stairwell door and held the folded paper between two fingers like evidence. Guilt sat heavy at the base of my throat as I stayed on the landing, the key still warm in my palm. The letter in his hand was the same one I had left on the kitchen table hours earlier. I had intended to slide it under his door and leave. Guilt, thin and sharp, drove me up these stairs. I had come to close something that had been living in my chest for months. I pushed past the pain into speech because I needed a fact between us. "How did you find this?" I said. My voice was small. Daniel did not answer right away. He looked at the paper and then at me. He stood framed in the doorway, jacket buttoned, the 5 o'clock shadow at his jaw outlined like a deliberate mark. The stairwell smelled like damp concrete and laundry detergent from the floor below. This was not the kitchen table, not the sink where he had been washing that glass, and not the click of his apartment door the last time I left, without finishing what I'd started. A concrete question mattered more than explanations. I had come because I needed to stop carrying the letter as if its weight were my fault. That was the problem I had been carrying. I thought my apology would fix the past. It had become a thing I gave away in hopes of being lighter. Daniel folded the paper once and then twice, slow fingers that did not tremble. "You left it on the table," he said finally. "It slid under when Marina went out." He did not name the time or finger the exact moment. He did not say he had read it. He placed the folded square on the stair rail between us as if it were fragile. The sight of the letter between his fingers turned the stairwell into a narrow courtroom. I stepped forward and reached for the paper. He moved his hand back a fraction and folded his arms. "Did you read it?" I asked. Daniel's eyes moved away. "No," he said. He sounded careful, like someone choosing a neutral surface to stand on. Not yet. Doubt arrived with the word. I had expected a defense, a denial, or a flush of anger. He gave a stall instead. The stall made the air between us brittle. I had expected something else from him, an argument, an admission, a slammed door, but not this measured retreat. The central problem wasn't only whether he had read the letter. The central problem was whether I had written this apology to repair him or to unburden myself. A rusted fire exit sign blinked overhead. I said, "I didn't come to make you take my apology, Daniel. I came so I could stop pretending I didn't owe it to myself." The words fell short. My hands clutched the brass of the stair railing and my fingers left small, tight marks. He swallowed. "Evelyn," he said. Saying my name pulled something closed in him, and then he made a motion toward the paper. "You shouldn't leave things like this." His voice had the distant rasp it always did when he tried to be reasonable. I stepped back. "You found it because Marina left, because she was practical and she picked it up," and I stopped. In the kitchen minutes earlier the house had been ordinary. The kettle, the jar of spoons, his hands wet at the sink. I had set the folded apology on the table and pushed it across the wood with the pad of my thumb. I had thought that if he held that paper in his hands he might change. The memory of the glass, the way he kept washing, was a small, solid piece of truth. I used it because concrete details steadied me. An arrival, sudden and loud, made me look over my shoulder. The hallway door clicked and Marina stepped in carrying her canvas tote and a thermos lid that had not closed properly. She saw the paper on the stair rail and then the two of us. She set the tote down and crossed the short distance with the briskness that steadied me. "Evelyn," Marina, voice even, "what are you doing here?" She did not wait for my answer. She looked at Daniel and then at the paper. "Did you take it?" she asked him. Daniel shrugged. "It was on the table," he said. "It moved into my hand." Marina reached for the paper and I braced to stop her. Her hand hovered, then curled back. She did not take it. Instead, she put a palm on my elbow and looked at me. "Evelyn, this is not for him to decide." The insistence in her voice was the thing that kept me from folding into silence. I had come to offer something, but Marina's steadying touch changed the frame. The apology had been written on nights when I could not sleep, ink smudged from rubbing my thumb across lines that named what I felt responsible for. Now it seemed suddenly small and dangerous. Small because it was only paper, dangerous because handing it over could allow Daniel to keep the power of deciding my guilt. Daniel stepped back into the apartment and gestured toward the doorway as if to say, "Come in." He kept his hands visible. His movement was cautious, a man used to keeping the scale of every conversation measured. We moved inside. The kitchen light threw a rectangle on the table. The folded paper sat there like a compass pointing at the center of everything we had not said. I placed my bag on a chair. Marina set the thermos on the counter and tilted it to check the seal. The tiny clack made a sound like a metronome. Sit, Daniel. He set the folded square in front of him on the table and did not pick it up. Sit, Evelyn. We'll do this properly. The command was simple. I sat. My hands would not stop tracing the edge of the letter with my fingertip. That motion had become my substitute for speech. If I could feel the paper, I could believe the apology would mean something. Marina took a seat opposite me and put both hands on the tabletop. You'd leave it under his door, she said to me without looking up. What changed? I told the truth because small, specific facts were what I trusted. I thought if I left it, he'd pick it up. I thought if he held it, he might see why I apologized. I breathed out hard. I thought I could fix it by explaining my part. Explain what? Daniel. There it was, a direct demand. He had a right to ask. His voice tightened. Explain why you left without answering my calls. Explain why you never told me that night. Explain why you blamed me for what I didn't do. He fired the questions like stones. My mouth opened and closed around the memory of the night he named. I had left after his words had cut and gone, as if leaving might halt the argument. I had thought disappearing would be less hurtful than staying and defending myself. Instead, my silence calcified into guilt. Daniel, Marina, and she used his name like a small lever. You need to stop assuming. Evelyn read it out loud. Then we'll all be done. Her practical insistence left no room for theatrics. I hesitated. The first emotion that rose in me was shame, a close, hot feeling that tightened my chest and made the paper weigh more in my hands. That guilt had guided me to the stairwell. Then anger flared because his silence had been a weapon. The shift from guilt to anger arrived in my jaw and in the way my fingers tightened on the paper. I unfolded the letter. My handwriting leaned right on the page, the ink blotting where I had stood up and walked a few paces to look out the window. I read slowly because each line was a small, deliberate act. Daniel, I am sorry for leaving without explaining. I am sorry for letting you carry the blame for hours. I am sorry for the nights you stayed up piecing together reasons I never gave. You did not deserve to be left with questions I could have answered. I stopped. Daniel's hand rose but did not reach. His jaw flexed. Marina's fingers pressed into the tabletop without breaking her composure. Okay, Daniel, after a moment. His voice was low. You wrote that. He put his palm flat on the table. Why now? That question shifted me. The second emotion shift arrived. From anger to a guarded clarity. I understood that my apology had always been less about him and more about the way I had slept, with my concerns turned inward. I wanted to stop making my absence an accusation. I said, I wanted to stop measuring my worth by the ways I failed you, Evelyn, Daniel. He looked at me slowly. You can't fix what didn't happen by telling me you sorry now. He meant that some wounds required other things than words. I heard it as a rebuke. My shoulders folded inward. Marina leaned forward. Then don't offer the apology to him as a favor, she said. Do something with it that ends it for you. Burn it. Keep it. Put it in a book. But don't hand your apology to someone who hasn't asked for it. She used my name to steady me. Daniel watched her as if he was taking inventory. You think I would read it and change? He asked. There was a brittle edge to his question. It sounded like a test. I don't know, I said. That isn't the point. Another external event arrived. Daniel's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, thumbed the screen without picking it up, and the display read a single word from a number I did not recognize. He slid the phone face down like a flat stone. The phone buzz acted like a reset. Daniel took a breath and then reached for his own pocket. He removed a small folded note, creased at the edges, and placed it on the table beside my letter without explanation. The movement was quiet and deliberate. For a moment no one spoke. Marina's mouth parted. You have a note, she said. He did not meet either of our gazes. I didn't want to bring it out, he admitted, but I found your letter, and I thought. His fingers tapped the table once. I thought we might be even. I felt the room tilt toward a new shape. This was the twist I had not expected, but which changed how the moment arranged itself. He had been carrying something too. He had not been the untroubled man I had left. He had a folded page of his own. You wrote to me, I asked. The question was brittle and nearly a whisper. He nodded, not to give, not to beg. I wrote because there were things I had not said, and I wanted to hold them in my own hands first. His fingers skimmed the edge of the small note, as if touching something still warm. Marina placed both hands flat on the table, then read it. She said, "Read what you wrote." "We will listen." Daniel unfolded his note. His handwriting was neat and controlled, the letters spaced the way they always were when he tried to keep reason in place. He read aloud each line measured. "Evelyn, I should have said I'm sorry for calling you names in a way that made you shut down. I should have said I was wrong to assume. I am sorry for making you leave. I am sorry for the nights you spent trying to undo something I started." The words landed like small stones. There was no flourish in his voice. When he read the last line, he looked up. His eyes were the cool gray they always were, but for the first time I saw the small crease between his brows relax. Marina let out a breath. "Wow," she said. She my name twice and then Daniel's, as if anchoring both of us. A rapid exchange followed, 3 short lines spoken between them, quick and tight. "Daniel, you can't decide how I forgive you," I said. "Evelyn, I'm not deciding for you," he said. "I'm saying I am responsible for my part." "Then show it, Marina, show it with something other than words." That was the argument we needed, and it contained 5 quick turns. It forced movement. Daniel's jaw tightened and then unclenched. He put his hand on the folded note and then slid it back into his pocket. I felt my own decision harden. The apology had been written in the belief that if I could hand it over he would shoulder the weight, and I would be free. The presence of his note changed the calculus. If both of us brought folded pages to the table, handing mine over would become a transaction where he might keep the right to decide my worth. I set my letter down between us and pressed the heel of my hand on top of it. The paper trembled under my palm. My fingers splayed and I felt the indent of the ink as a physical map of nights I'd spent awake. "I'm not giving this to you," I said. The sentence came out sharper than I intended. "I'm not asking for it back from you either." I wrote it for myself. My voice had a steadiness now that was not shame. It was a choice. Daniel watched me for a long beat. He my name in that quiet way and then asked, "What will you do with it?" Marina's eyes met mine. "Put it somewhere you can't reach it when you retempted to second. Guess yourself," she said. She was practical to the end. I picked the letter up and walked to the small bookshelf by the window. It contained novels I had read twice and a stack of journals with worn spines. I opened a volume half hidden between 2 others and slid the folded paper into the center. My hands moved deliberately. I closed the book and pushed it back into place. The action felt final in a way, saying sorry I'd not. Daniel's shoulders loosened a fraction. He exhaled, and for the first time since the stairwell his posture lost its defensive tightness. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "You didn't have to keep your note in your pocket either," I said. It was not an accusation, it was an observation. Marina reached across and squeezed my wrist once. The gesture was quick and not theatrical. It meant, "You did not hand your pain away." It meant, "You kept control of your apology." We sat in a quieter space then. The kettle boiled, the small sound filling an otherwise still kitchen. Daniel stood and poured water into 2 mugs, handed one to Marina and then to me. The mundane rhythm of making tea made room for the aftermath. "What changes now, Daniel?" There was a real question in it. He had not asked for absolution. He had asked what came next. "We live with what we did," I said. "We answer the questions we still owe each other." We stopped leaving the other person to guess. I met his eyes, and I stopped letting my apology fix things for you instead of freeing me. He unclenched his hands. "I'll try to answer when you ask. I'll try not to assume. I don't know how long that takes." There was a humility in the statement. It wasn't a grand promise. It was measured and specific. Marina smiled in that quick way she did, the laugh lines at her eyes making an honest crease. "That's a start," she said. An unexpected reveal came when Daniel pushed his chair back and pulled the small note from his pocket again. He set it beside the book where my letter lay hidden and then, without saying anything, tore the note in half and folded the pieces until they made an almost blank square. He burned the paper in the kitchen sink with the flame of his lighter, watching the ash curl. He didn't ask for me to watch. He didn't make a show. The action was private and unmistakable. That moment shifted something between us. The action spoke louder than the words. It changed the direction of blame, and it showed a willingness to hold consequence. My jaw unclenched. I picked up my untouched mug and felt its warmth. The heat steadied my hands. I thought about the stairwell again, the way he had raised the paper, the way I had reached and then stopped. That suspended moment had forced me to choose. When Marina rose to leave, she took my thermos and slung the canvas tote over her shoulder. "Get some sleep," she told me. She used my name in a softer tone and then pulled the door closed behind her as she left. The click of the latch was a small, concrete end to her presence. Daniel walked me to the landing and stopped at the top of the stairs. He did not touch me. He folded his hands and then said, "Evelyn, I don't expect you to forgive me now. I only want you to stop punishing yourself for the parts we both had." The last line like a return to the simplest fact. I let the last of my anger drop out of my shoulders. "I won't hand you that work to carry," I said. "That's not my job anymore." My voice was even. I put my hand on the stair rail and felt the cool metal. The stair light hummed above us. I walked down, closed the door behind me, and locked it. In the hallway the night was pale with streetlight. I could have given the letter away to be carried across someone else's chest. Instead, I had placed it where only I could find it, hidden in a book on my shelf. That act felt like a small, clear repair. As I stepped onto the pavement, the dawn was just a sliver, the sky blanching at the edges. The letter was not in my hand. It was not passed back and forth like a coin. It belonged to me in a way it never had when I pretended it could fix everything. I walked away with my bag heavy but steadier. The apology had stopped being a thing I offered him, and had started being the act I performed to stop measuring myself by what I had not said. The change was concrete. I had folded the paper, read it aloud, placed it in a book, and left the apartment with the knowledge that decisions would need to be answered with actions, not just ink. At the bottom of the block I paused and placed my fingers on the book in my bag, where a blank page had become a repository for promises and confessions. I did not tuck the book back into the shelf that night. I carried it home, and that felt like the right measure. I would return it when I wanted to check my own words, and not when I needed someone else to weigh them. I did not expect forgiveness to arrive like a bell. I expected small, precise acts. Answers to questions asked, small apologies met with changes, a coffee bought when one of us forgot. I expected the work of ordinary living to do what grand declarations could not. Behind me, the apartment door remained closed. Daniel's silhouette had been the first sharp, unwelcome sight of the night, and yet in the end what mattered was not the silhouette, but the things we actually did and the papers we folded into ash or into books. The stairwell had given me an ugly, honest moment and a simple choice. I chose to keep my apology for myself. I walked toward the pale street, and the early light cut across the sidewalk. The concrete was real and cool under my shoes. I kept my hands in my coat pockets and felt the small warmth of the gold ring on my index finger. That physical touch grounded me. When I reached the corner, a bus hissed by and I watched rain glint on the windshield. The city made small noises. Someone laughed in a passing doorway. A door closed nearby. The ordinary sounds did not erase what had happened. They simply kept me moving. I thought of the stairwell again and the precise moment he had held my letter up and said my name. That memory would stay with me. I would not hand that image to anyone as a weapon. It would be mine to remember and to use as a marker of the night I stopped giving away my apology. At the block corner I turned and walked toward home with the book under my arm, the folded letter safe between its pages. The small decision, to keep or destroy, to hand over or to tuck away, had changed how I measured what I owed. It did not resolve everything. It did, however, stop me from carrying other people's silence as my burden. I put my key in the lock when I got back. The book went to the second shelf, third slot, between a novel with a torn spine and a blank journal. I slid it in and let my hands rest on the shelf for a heartbeat. The letter was in the middle of the book like a quiet thing that would not be used as a lever again. The last action of the night was simple. I closed the living room door, pressed the deadbolt, and turned away. The lock clicked. It was a small, precise sound and a concrete finish. My apology rested on the shelf. I had folded it, read it, and chosen where it would live. That decision was not a finish line. It was a boundary I drew around what I was willing to offer other people, and what I would hold for myself. I walked toward the bedroom and lay down without rehearsing the moment in my head. The room held its ordinary objects: the journal on the nightstand, the fountain pen, the worn leather cover of other letters I had written and kept. The letter was not gone. It was no longer a thing I intended to hand away. Outside, the sky lightened. Inside, the house hummed with the small sounds of someone who had made a choice and acted on it. I slept, not because everything had been solved, but because I had done the one concrete thing that can sometimes begin to free a person. I stopped offering my apology as someone else's responsibility. I had tucked it into a book and closed the cover. The final sound I heard before sleep was the click of the deadbolt and the settling creak of the floorboards. The letter would be there in the morning, and if I wanted to look at it, I could. If I wanted to keep it forever, that too would be my decision. End of the night, I had chosen. The apology he never asked for remained mine to keep.